24/7, because it was the only way he could convince his wife to go and live in America. Was he said, I'm going to build you an American house. So his friends would say, how are you doing this? And he goes, come up to my roof. And he had a whole bunch of panels up there. And they go, well, how does this work? He goes, well, they produce electricity. And I have a little inverter downstairs, and what that does is it converts the direct current into alternating current, and then it just goes right into my panel. And I use it in the house, and the excess goes straight out into the grid. And I have a two-way meter, which in those days, of course, you had to buy, because CFE didn't know what a two-way meter was. And they said, yeah, but I mean, still, you're running this great big house with air conditioning 24/7. Your electricity bill must be huge. He goes, well, depends what you mean by huge. I pay 1,000 pesos every 2 months. And you're like, what? You have a gap, right? You know, that little thing at the back, which, you know, those guys have been offering you. You can get jail time for that, okay? So no, it was with the solar system, and he was able to bring his bill down to 1,000 pesos. So what happened was, a lot of his friends says, I want you to put the same system in my house. So he went from having a window business to having a solar business. And he went in it big time. He educated himself, he's gone all over the world to the manufacturers. We have direct deals with the manufacturers. And basically this company is very well connected. But one of the things that impressed me the most, and one of the reasons I partnered up with them to open up here in Cancun and Riviera Maya, was that they're very serious. It doesn't mean we all walk around, you know, smiling. It means it's a company that's been around since 2007, okay, which in solar terms is like ancient history. And it's going to be here tomorrow and the day after. Unfortunately, like every new business, some people come into the market seeing an opportunity to make very quick money, and they're here today, gone tomorrow, and you don't obviously want to end up paying a deposit and the people are gone and you don't have any panels. So anyway, so we have services right through from engineering to designing your system, etc. So I'll just pull these all up at once. We represent some of the largest global manufacturers. Very quick history lesson of solar. Solar really took a hold, of all places, in Europe. Now I say of all places because mainly actually in Northern Europe. Either these people are incredibly optimistic or they're out of touch with reality, because in a lot of Northern Europe it's not very sunny. We live in one of the best places in the world for solar energy because it's sunny about 300 days out of the year. Even on a cloudy day, you're still going to produce electricity with a solar panel, but less than you would on a fully sunny day. And our latitude and longitude here is such that we're in a very good situation, that we have very high efficiency from our panels. And one of the things I'm going to try not to do is bore you with lots of technical terms. But if you're interested in learning more technical, we'll hang around afterwards. You can ask any questions. Oh, I'm talking about questions. If there's something I've said you haven't understood, or you want more clarification at the moment, please just shout. If it's something that we haven't touched on yet, let's go through the presentation and then we'll handle it afterwards. Okay. Another great thing about solar is very, very low maintenance. Okay. Now, if you've lived here for any time at all, you will know that living so close to the beach, maintenance is an issue. Anything metallic, which is outside, is going to rust. It's going to corrode. Even stainless steel. Right? It is amazing. We have a very corrosive, very high humidity atmosphere. Solar is beautiful in that the maintenance it's not zero, but it's very, very low and much lower than the alternatives. Very long warranties. A solar panel has a warranty on production for 25 years. And actually I have friends who have been in the solar business for longer than that, but not grid tied, actually on isolated systems, off-grid systems. And they tell me they've had their systems running for 30 years and still running just fine. The inverter, which is the electronic part, which actually converts electricity from the direct current that the panels produce to the AC that we use in our house, that's guaranteed for 10 years, and we do installations and we guarantee for 5 years, so longer than a car warranty. Okay. We have certified personnel, very competitive pricing. Now, each case is a little bit different, but depending on your particular situation, the tariff you're on, etc., actually a solar system, a grid-type system, can save up to 90%. I'll give you my case because I became a client before I became involved in the company. When I was doing this search for all these different companies, they came, they did a very professional study, they did a very professional proposal, and in their proposal they showed me that my average spend, and we all know our bills vary according to the time of year, right? You probably just had one of your biggest, right? The last 2 months, very hot, and you've had to use air conditioning and it's expensive, right? So my average 2-month bill was 9,000 pesos. So I was spending 4,500 pesos every month. And with solar panels, I've reduced that to 400 pesos. So I've gone from, you know, I'm the 90%. I've saved 90% of my bill. This I just want to show because we're not, you know, two men above efficiency. We buy in very large quantities. We buy panels, for example, by the container load directly from the manufacturer. So we have pricing that's pretty much better than anybody. Okay, I promised I wasn't going to get technical, but I'll get a little bit technical because it's important that we understand terminology. A watt is just a measure of energy, and actually volts times amps gives you watts. So depending on the type of bulbs and everything we've got here, like here we've got a spiral. So I don't know, that's probably what, 13 watts, maybe 20 watts, something like that. One of the bits of advice I would give you is switch to LED. LED lighting is much more efficient, so it pushes out less heat and more light. A regular old-fashioned light bulb is actually a heater. It gives out 90% of its energy in heat and only 10 in light. And of course, in most cases, we're trying to keep our home cool. So it's very, very counterproductive. 1,000 watts is a kilowatt. 1,000 kilowatts is a megawatt. And 1,000 megawatts, anybody know? Is a gigawatt.
Excuse me.
Yes?
I don't understand. You switch to what kind of a bulb?
LED,
Oh.
LED.
Yeah.
They cost more, although the price has been coming down tremendously. But for example, a 5-watt bulb will be giving out the same amount of lumens as this one, but you'll be using, you know, probably 4 times less energy.
And
So-
what about, I've heard that, are those the ones that have the little white ring underneath? If they
There's
break
different-
them, they have like...
They're assembling the panels. Because there's a lot of companies, they buy the parts in, and the 3 biggest companies for solar panels in the world right now are all Chinese. And you know, it's funny, I have this conversation with people about quality. We highly recommend Yingli. Did anyone watch the World Cup? You see all the advertising, right, for Yingli, but they're now the #1 in the world, but they have extraordinarily good quality control. I mean, really good. Superior to anything else we've seen. And I was with a client the other day, and he goes, he told me, I said, well, we have a Mexican company we use, very good, solid tech. Oh, yes, yeah. I didn't have the heart to tell him that the actual bit that's making the energy is made by the Chinese company, and it's assembled here into a panel by the Mexican company. So, but the price is, it's amazing how it's come down. Basically, it come from about $77 per watt in 1977, and then it just took an absolute tumble here as more investment and the market expanded, and we're down to about, for the panel only, about $1 a watt today. And at the same time, global PV stands for photovoltaic, by the way. Just means solar, but it's the process. Because, by the way, one of the myths, and I put some of these in our little brochure here, but a lot of people, when you mention solar, they go, oh yeah, that's for heating up your water, right? And there are actually little things you can buy. You can buy them in Home Depot, and a few other companies supply them, which will heat up your water. But I don't know about you. Who the hell is bathing with hot water at this time of year? It's like, put some ice in the thing. But what's interesting is, if I wanted to put Mexico's PV part in here, but unfortunately, it's not even 1 pixel wide on this graph. I mean, it's nothing. We're way behind the curve, and it's one of the reasons that it's a good thing to get into.
So that's installation or is production of the panels?
No, that's actually production. That's production. And this has been extrapolated along to 2018, right? So right now Mexico's at about 0.1% of this amount. Now, Thomas Edison, we all know Thomas Edison invented the first light bulb, constructed the world's first electric grid, and he has a quote which I just happen to love for my business, which is, "We are like tenant farmers chopping down the fence around our house for fuel, when we should be using nature's inexhaustible sources of energy, sun, wind and tide. I put my money on the sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that." And without going off onto any sort of political diatribe, we all know that there's an enormous amount of political interests to actually do just that. Keep everyone focusing on oil and coal and gas. Now this is a very interesting chart. The big thing that looks like the sun is actually representative of the sun, and all the others, I don't know if you can read them, but you've got tide, geothermal, hydro, biomass, OTEC, wind, natural gas, petroleum, uranium, coal. The energy from the sun absolutely eclipses every other energy source by far. We need about 1/10 of 1% to harness that power to more than have all the power we need on Earth at the moment. It's really, it's pretty amazing. How many of you are on Facebook? Okay.
Everybody here.
They wouldn't be here if they weren't.
Well, I saw, you know, the Facebook, the internet in general, right? It's got some fantastic stuff on it. It's got some absolute drivel. And I saw one the other day that they're very concerned about solar panel because it's reflecting back the sun's rays out of Earth. And this may have dire consequences. Yeah, what, like global cooling? Ask Los Cabos how they're doing with the global warming, right? I mean, it's just nonsense. So don't believe everything you read. Okay, so if you don't remember anything else from tonight, remember this. What are the advantages of solar energy? Number one, always available. Okay? Now, if I was in the north of Scotland, that might not be true. I actually made the mistake of taking my Yucatecan wife to live in England for a year. And I think from about December to the middle of February, we didn't see the sun. And she's like, what's happening? Is it the end of the world? She'd never seen anything like it in all her life. So, and this area is fantastic. Now, here's one of the things that gets confusing in solar. Panels are rated by the number of watts. So the sort of global standard today is 250 watt panel. So 4 panels, if you remember the previous slide, will give us 1 kilowatt, right? Well, that's peak output. And one of the things that people won't talk about or don't talk about is any of the negatives. Well, the little mini negative here is our temperature. Our temperature is higher, really, than the solar cells really like. So that is translated into slightly lower efficiency than we otherwise might have, but it's compensated by the amount of sun we get. So the actual graph of production of a solar cell, if we were to take our axis like this, with this being the amount of power being produced, and this is time, The thing will turn itself on about 6 o'clock in the morning, but it won't produce very much at that time, and then it builds up, builds up, builds up, builds up, and what we get is an absolutely classic bell curve. Okay? So, how many of you are mathematicians? How many of you were freaked out by high school mathematics? You can work out what the area underneath this curve is, but it requires some logarithms and horrible stuff like that. So what we do is we actually flatten it out, and we pretend that actually what happens is suddenly the panel turns on, it stays on for a certain amount of time, and then it goes off, which is not what happens. But this period here, in this area, is about 5 hours. Okay, you get more in the summer when you need it most, and you get less in the winter, but it's more or less. So if we do the math on a 250 watt panel at full power for 5 hours, right, we get 1,250 watts or 1.25 kilowatts out of a single panel. And that's where it starts all to get a bit complicated. Well, like a classic question, like, okay, I want you to put in a system, Roger, that will run the air condition in my teenage son's bedroom because he never shuts it off, right? You get stuff like that. That's not how it works, okay? When you have a solar array with grid tie, what happens is the energy just goes into your panel, and it can be used any which way but loose. When you're not using it, it goes back into the grid, and actually you have a bidirectional meter, and it just, you end up paying the difference between what you used and what you sent back in. That's simple. It really is simple. The way my wife explains it, and I love it, she goes, in the house, nothing changes. Nothing changes. There's no sudden flickering of a light because, you know, a cloud went over.
So you send back the electricity to the CFE, and then
yes.
You gotta trust them to...
Well, no, you don't have to trust them because you have a meter, all right? And actually, you bring up a brilliant point, which is, okay, what about scaling the system? Because you're utilizing, they have to pay you for it. Well, here it doesn't quite work like that, but what they do is they will give you credit. So, for example, there's a sort of fairly large population of people, I'm sure you know people who do this, that are only here for a few months of the year. Or let's use the other example I was talking about before, Progresso. You know, the people that have their summer houses on the beach in Progresso. They're only there for 2 months, but in those 2 months, they are using power like there's no tomorrow. They've all got air conditioning and big TVs, etc. So they are just a beautiful candidate for solar power because we can put in a pretty small system, and basically from September through June, it's producing, and all that's building up a bank of credit, and that's exactly what they call it. They call it your bank of in here, and it shows up on your bill. And then July and August, when they're going crazy with using it, that's what gets used first, and then they might get a bill at the end of it. So they will save up energy, but it's a little bit, if you think about the kind of air miles analogy, you have to use those air miles in 12 months. Okay? So if you have a solar array and you leave the country for 2 years, invite a friend to go down and use your house and use your energy. Okay?
And they credit you at the same rate as they bill you?
Well, it's not a rate, they credit you in kilowatts.
Oh, so it's the same rate.
Actually, kilowatt hours. Okay, because there's another one that's very confusing. We've just seen, you know, watts, kilowatts, but on your bill, what you're being charged is kilowatt hours, which isn't the same thing at all. Okay? If we had a series of lights that were using 100 watts, okay, and we had them on for 10 hours, okay, it would be 100 watts times 10 would give us 1,000 watts or 1 kilowatt, okay? That would be 1 kilowatt hour, even though the lights were on for 10 hours, okay? So it's a bit confusing when people talk about kilowatts and people talk about kilowatt hours. The one that matters for you on your bill is kilowatt hours. And here how many of you live right here in Playa? Okay. Have you noticed how cool it is here compared to Cancun? No, right? Cancun is considered hotter than Playa. So CFE has it in a different tariff from Playa. Playa, if you're on the lowest residential tariff, it's tariff 1, but it's followed by a B. And the B refers to our average summertime temperatures, okay? And that B is the amount that you would need to consume to get you out of the 1 tariff and into the dreaded DAC. Okay, DAC stands for Domestico Alto Consumo, okay, which means domestic high consumption, and suddenly you're paying 3 pesos 54 cents for every single kilowatt. And in 1B, you get 150 kilowatts at about 70 cents, you get another 150 kilowatts at about 80, 85 cents, and then the excess is 280. It's still better than 354, all right? So actually one of our little strategies is we save you money in 2 ways. We save you money because the solar array will produce energy that hasn't cost you anything other than the investment, obviously, and will hopefully put a system on your house which is big enough to get you down into that 1B tariff, so the electricity, you're now getting a subsidy and all the rest of it. So that's a huge advantage.
But you wouldn't need the electricity anymore.
Well, we actually recommend that you don't put a system that exceeds your usage, because how are you going to use that credit, you know? Plus, quite honestly, I can't produce solar power at 70 cents per peso. It's just
So
too
it would
cheap.
be a combination.
Yeah. Now,
You need actually that to make it work.
well, not necessarily. I'll tell you what. The excess is at 280. Even if you're in 1B, but you're at the very high end of 1B,
Okay.
because what makes it 1B is not the amount of subsidy you're getting, but the amount before you jump into the DAC tariff. So for example, in Cancun, that's 850 kilowatt hours a month. Here it's only 400. So here, if you have a daily average use of 13.3 kilowatt hours or more, you're in DAC. Now that's not one billing cycle. It's a 12, they actually look at a 12-month moving average, and it's why, it's a bit like that game, Snakes and Ladders. You know, once you get into DAC, it is very difficult to get out of that.
You change your name.
Yeah, but you know what? That is actually, CFE have some very smart people there, and they figured that one out. And it's becoming very difficult now. They're asking for notarized contracts that, you know, what's the reason that you changed the name of the contract? Have you really got somebody else living in the house, or was the house sold or something? So, yeah, the old days, yeah, but now, much more difficult. So second, we're already on to the second benefit. Sorry, got sidetracked. Ecological, totally renewable, 0 emissions, okay, no noise or vibrations, which wind is not that way, and basically 0 negative impact on the environment. Provides economic savings. I mean, this is clear. Remember that curve that came way down? The cost is now such that the economic savings are obvious. It's economically viable. Okay, grid time in particular offers immediate and substantial savings. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, well, how quickly does it pay for itself? And of course, the answer to that is it depends. And we have a system. We have a little online system. We plug in your actual history, and then it comes out with what it recommends. And one of the things it shows you is how quickly that payoff will be. I've seen in certain circumstances that be as quick as about 3 years, but the average is probably about 4 or 5. But you know, the way I looked at it when I bought my system was, wow, okay, so in 4 years I would have paid the same that I would have paid anyway, and the thing's guaranteed for 25, so I'm getting 21 years of free electricity. I like it. So, next one, flexible. This is a really big one because it can be very easily integrated into an existing property. You know, these government offices, it's like, wow, how did anyone come up with that process? Could it be any more complicated? I didn't know I needed my grandmother's birth certificate, you know. But we do all that. Basically, there's some limits in grid time. In a residential setup, you can have up to 10 kilowatts, which if we're talking about 250 watt panels, that's 40 panel system. Commercial, that goes up to 30, and industrial goes up to 500.
That's always per hour, right?
Sorry?
Per hour?
No, that's the total, no, that's the good question. That's the total output of the system. So you're assuming, that, and it's the installed power, not what you're actually producing, it's what it's rated to. So that's why in residential it's a 40 panel system, you can't have more. Now, if you have a giant house which sits on a double lot, okay, and it's not, you've got dos predios, and you might have 2 meters on that, then each meter could supposedly have a 40 kilowatt system on it. Okay?
I have a question. I live in a condominium and I want to convince my homeowners association to do this.
Yes.
But if I don't, I live in the penthouse and I do have a rooftop.
Yes.
Can I put it just for my house?
Yes.
And would it be this rate to this 10?
Well, almost certainly you wouldn't need. I mean, to give you an idea, the only properties I've ever seen that needed as much as 10 kilowatts are like some of the massive rental properties, like down in Akimal and Maya Suleiman and everything, that have vacation renters who, the first thing they do when they arrive here is turn on all the air conditioners and leave the doors open. Yeah, exactly. A general house would almost never need that. And I'll just explain this one to you because this is very interesting actually. In a regular situation is, you have a house, and I'll do a kind of a child's version of a house, mainly because I can't draw. But if we have panels up on this roof, how the system works is the panels produce DC energy and it goes down to what's called an inverter, which actually what it does is it does a lot of complicated things, but basically it just switches electricity from DC to power that you can actually use in your house, which is another beauty of this. You don't have to change any appliances, everything works just the same. And that goes to your electrical panel, where your breakers are, right? And that obviously is connected out to where your meter is, and that in turn is connected to CFE, okay? But let's say it wasn't that. Let's say this wasn't a house, but now we're talking about a condo with maybe 9 different apartments in there. Then, of course, you've got all sorts of issues, haven't you? Like who owns the roof, and who wants in, who doesn't. And actually, CFE have come up with a really nice solution to this. It's called a collective contract. And so in this case, there'd actually be a wall, wouldn't there, usually, with like 9 meters on it, okay? Well, all we would do in this case is we would add 1 more meter, and that meter would only basically go to the inverter, and it goes straight, all the power going back, all of it, okay? And between you all, you'd have a homeowners association meeting, and you'd say, right, I want panels. Well, I don't. I do. And maybe you have 2 people that say no, and the rest of you split it, but not in the equal amount. Maybe you say, I want loads of air conditioning, I want 40% of the panels are mine, and somebody else says, I only need 10%. And so in that same proportion, a bit like voting rights and everything in a condo, you would get that percentage of whatever that meter is producing. So if the meter produced 1,000 kilowatts in a month, and you had 10% of it, you'd have 100 kilowatts of yours.
But,
Okay.
but still, it would still benefit even if they from one from right?
Oh yes. Yeah.
But the penthouse is different, I think. She has her own roof.
The penthouse is different. I mean, if we actually have done installs in condos where to the penthouse owner owns the roof, let's say. When you're in a situation with a condo, there are other alternatives. For example, there are condos that have parking areas that would set up very well to have the panels put on a structure, and actually then you're getting like a triple benefit because you're creating shade for the car, you're producing energy, as well. So it's a nice solution. The only thing that it has to be on the right side of the building. I mean, not literally on the right, on the correct side in terms of orientation and not being in the shade, because obviously it doesn't make much sense to have solar panels and install them in the shade. Right? I think the question things are going good. Why don't you just keep up with questions?
How much time will it take to connect with CFE? Because I think they want to have first the whole system build it up, right? And see it and check it. And
Depends which office you're dealing with. Unfortunately, they haven't.
how is the experience here? Because I know in Tulum they have very low experience with solar connection and all this.
Yes.
And in Playa they have more.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, it's a federal organisation. You think the process.
I know
is
it's
all
bad
the same.
area already because a bunch of people have it.
Well, with us, we've unfortunately it's not what you know, it's who you know, right? So we've got very good connections, and generally speaking, it's a very smooth process. But it's a lot of legwork because you have to hand in Format 1 and the solicitude, and then they think about it for a while, and then they come and inspect, and then.
And here it's the same, right? You have to build everything ready, and then they might come over.
Well, we're getting to the stage where actually they're telling us in advance what day and time they're going to go, which is almost like I have to sit down.
How can you know that right now?
Yes.
Are you going to be ready?
Yeah. No, it's actually pretty good. And it's like everything in life. Once you get those relationships with those people, things are always much better. Yeah.
They're pretty well organized, though, the CFE.
It
Yeah,
depends where you are.
they-
In Tulum they're not.
Yeah.
But maybe they are, but they don't provide the people service.
They know what's going on.
The one of the challenges is the guys who are actually out in the street really don't understand it. They don't. They're sent to inspect something they don't have.
They don't even know what an amp is, right?
No.
Everyone has their
Guys on
both direction meter
what
and
an amp is.
you don't know what to do with it.
Yeah. So it presents some challenges. Let's say. Yeah.
Maybe this is a little bit of a stupid question, but being in a hurricane area,
Yes.
how would it be to secure the
Right.
panels?
Great question. And actually, let me just jump ahead to. I'm just going to show a couple of things on this because. First of all, just show you this slide. It's very interesting. This is actually the makeup of a panel, and you've got an anodized aluminium frame. Okay. On top of that, you've got tempered glass. Now, I get the ratings wrong, but if you look at the stress that can take, it's unbelievable. It's about 950 kilograms can be on a panel without causing problems. So, like impact resistance is very good. One of the challenges, and there's a competitor up in Cancun, and it's quite funny when they ask this question because they're from Monterey, they've never been here in a hurricane, and they just have no idea. Oh no, well, the wind comes from the sea, so you just put them this way.
Not necessarily.
It's a hurricane, it's a cyclone. I mean, anyway, so I've been through Wilma, I've been through Gilbert, so I know a little bit about hurricanes. There are steps that you can take in the installation process itself to ensure that your investment is not going to blow away. And one of those is looking at what is known as either a flat installation, which is actually not totally flat, but it leaves very little space for air to get in and out under it. That's one thing. The second thing is even an angled installation is very straightforward indeed to take the rear legs off, lower the panel and bolt it back down to the roof. I actually have a friend in Phuket Beach who, Wilma went right over the top of him, nothing happened to his panels. But it's all about the quality of installation. I have seen already people who've got installations with very nice quality panels and a very nice quality inverter, but an absolutely horrible installation. And in fact, this would be a good time. This is kind of a mock-up of how our installations are done. Alternating current. Nothing's for DC. So one of the things you'll see very commonly is people installing panels but using AC equipment. It's dangerous. A panel can pull off a whole bunch of volts in DC, and I don't know how many of you have been electrocuted by AC, and it's quite nasty, but DC is worse. And it's one of the reasons they chose AC for home use.
Just quickly, we'll hand this around with the other ones going around, if everybody wouldn't mind just putting their name and where they're living. And the last thing at the end is if you'd like us to contact you.
Let me just. Okay, I'm just going to show this slide, and I do apologise that this is all in Spanish, but we're doing a free Spanish class as well tonight. No. Basically, what you're looking at with that rail is this foot here is a solid piece of extruded aluminium, and what we do is we go into the concrete with the type of expansive anchor that they use for hurricane shutters and hurricane fabrics and stuff like that. So what happens with those is almost like a barb. As it goes in and you tighten up, it expands out and it becomes more and more difficult to pull out. So they're very, very solidly put in. The rail itself is they're specially made, they're for solar, and the section that they have means they've got an enormous amount of strength. And then all the bits and pieces, all the hardware we buy in. It's special for the job. And as I said, I've seen some absolutely horrible installations. In fact, what are we looking at? That's just some of the hardware there that we use for installation. These are some installations, and these are some different ones. So going to the question, I forgot who was asking about the mounting, but for example, sometimes we have to mount on top of a structure because you've got roofs that are full of equipment, or they have a dome, boiler of some sort. This is a very typical installation where you've got about a 20 degrees.
Sorry to interrupt, but what is the size, the average size of one panel?
It's about a meter this way and about 165 lengthwise.
So how many panels would you install for a normal house?
Well, there really is no such thing. That's the thing. I never base my insulation on what's the size of a house. I need to look at the bill. So when I look at the bill, and for example, here's a house in Fuerteventura, okay, and we only needed 6 panels for this lady because, and it's a classic example. She is a person who's on a fixed income, she's retired, and she spends most of the time worrying about is she going to get up into debt. And she lives very uncomfortably. So we took a look at it, we said, look, you only need, with this little 6-panel system, I can keep you out of debt and you can live more comfortably. So for the first month she had the panels, I was going monitoring it every day and basically saying, it's okay, you can turn your air conditioning on. People get a bit, but hey, it's understandable, it's new.
I have a question.
Yes.
The batteries that you were mentioning before, the lithium batteries,
Yes.
how often do they need changing and what is the cost of them?
We don't, with a grid-type system, you don't need any batteries. You only need that if you're off-grid.
Okay.
And there's, you've got the lead, you've got gel, and you've got lithium. With lithium being the most expensive, but it also has the highest efficiency. But that's an off-grid system, which we do that as well. But it's slightly different because what happens in a grid type, it's very interesting, that the inverter, which kind of looks like this, kind of looks like one of those pass-through water heaters, that sort of size. And in fact, I have a friend who says it in a very nice way, I think. He says, it's a bit like installing an air conditioner. There's a part that goes on the roof, and there's a part that goes inside your home, right? The only difference with this air conditioner is it's not going to cost you money, it's going to make you money. What this does, it has to be connected to power for it to work. So it's connected to the AC power, and it's connected to the direct current from the panels. And what it actually does is it looks at that energy coming in, it goes, oh, CFE is sending me, well, they're meant to send you 220, 60 cycles. Of course, we did one today, and at the time of hookup, we were getting 256 volts. We meant to get 220, so that was interesting. One of the reasons we use this company so much because they're very programmable and you can adapt, and they're very robust.
Can you move
And
it?
it's German.
I'm curious, but can you move it? Like, how is it to install it? Can you move it from one place to another place? Is that something?
You can. I mean, obviously the installation is, it's not permanent, let's say, but it's semi-permanent. I mean, in these cases, we put little concrete bases to hold these anchors in because we don't want that hardware sitting in a puddle of water. So we take steps like that. But for example, I've got a client right now who is actually similar to your situation. She's in a penthouse. She's locked into, and wants to be locked into a contract for 4 years rental. And she's in exactly that situation of what can I do? What are my costs if I don't stay after 4 years? Well, there's sort of 3 different things you could do. One is you can, if you own the property, you could obviously, and you were going to sell, you could sell it with the equipment installed, and all the warranties are transferable to the new owner. Okay, number 1. Number 2 is you could take it with you, because most people are in love with their panels, kind of a kinky kind of thing.
So you
they
can.
are. And you can take them with you, and what you'd have to pay for is we'd come in and dismantle, we'd use as much of the stuff as we could in the new one, and we'd have to do a reinstall for you. So there would be a cost involved there. And the third one is obviously you could just, the person buying a house doesn't want it, but you could sell it to somebody else. It's a commodity. Panels really are a commodity.
It's like an AC.
Yeah. But with the difference that what happens with ACs, for example, you've all heard of this inverter technology, right? With the ACs, mini splits, they're inverter. Much more efficient, but it costs quite a lot more than a regular mini split. So over time, that air conditioning unit is basically becoming less and less efficient. And I can't tell you how often we go into a home and, you hear this air labouring away, and it's like, one thing you might want to do is get rid of that piece of junk and get, it's like driving around in a car from the 1970s that's, guzzling gas, whereas a more modern car has got a lot more efficiency. But the panel is not going to be that way. The only thing I think we're going to see over time is I think we're going to see, maybe the dimensions of something that would be 250 watt panel today will be smaller. But, I think it's stable down so much, it's stabilized in terms of things, and this is a question we get a lot. Shouldn't I wait till the technology improves? I said, well, the technology is not going to improve as much as the savings you're going to make while you're sitting around waiting to decide whether you want to buy or not. So in other words, if you buy solar now, and another person doesn't buy it for 2 years, the money you've saved in those 2 years is more than displace the difference in technology that we might see 2 years from now. Okay, so just want to show you another couple of insulation types. Here, what we had is we had a flat roof, an inclined roof, tiled with concrete tiles. And this particular client, their major concern was hurricanes. I'm not going to get up on the roof, I'm not going to do anything in a hurricane. So we went for, this is known as a flat insulation. It's not actually flat, it just means that the panels are flat on the rail. This actually has about somewhere between 6 and 8 degrees of inclination, which is pretty perfect here. And in the summer, what happens is our relative position to the sun is such that the efficiency of a flat insulation in the summer is actually higher than mangled. Where you lose a little bit is in the winter, but this is a person who doesn't use their air conditioning in the winter. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And then here, I just want to show you this one. Because what you see here, if you've got sharp eyes, and I'll show you another slide on this, is 2 different panel types. You may have heard that there are single or monocrystalline. And the one that looks like a diamond shape on it, that's the monocrystalline. And years ago, they had a much higher efficiency rating than the multi. But today, they're within about 1% of each other, but the price difference is still significant. And then what we have here, this is a very efficient way of mounting, but probably the least protected in the case of strong wind, because it's a single mount. And what's nice about it is you can get a lot of panels very close to one another without having to leave gaps. So it's a very efficient use of space. Aesthetically, it's very nice, and also the angle can be changed very easily. And I just wanted to show you this. This is actually very similar to what we've got on the brochure, but I just want to give you an explanation of what's on your bill. Okay. Basically, on your top or near the top, you have the type of use. So this is Domesticon, and this is DAC, which is a nasty thing to see on your bill. A lot of people ask what the ELOs are. ELOs are phases, okay? So each phase is 127 volts in a perfect world here. So if you're on a single phase, it means you don't have 220 in your house. So most people have 2 phases at least, and that gives you the ability to be connected at 220. You'd think that 127 and 127 would give you more than 220, but actually it doesn't. This is the amount you have to pay. This is the number of your service. And then you actually have the readings. So they have the actual reading versus the previous. So if you ever get a bill that you just think is totally outrageous, the very first thing you should do is go down to the meter and read it. And take a note. Maybe they've done an estimate instead of, or maybe they've misread your bill. Maybe the guy reading your bill was hungover. Who knows? Okay, so that would be the first thing to check. And then they also give you your history. And actually, this is old. That history is now on the back of your bill, not on the front. And it's very interesting to look at that, because one of the things that I found was that despite the fact that I was consuming less electricity, the amount of pesos I was spending was going up. And the reason for that was because they keep changing this number here, which is the price per kilowatt. And then what we've done here is we've shown this person now has panels. So they went down from a 4,000 peso bill to 130 pesos. We got them into 1B. They've got subsidized rates and paying a whole bunch less. As I say, each one varies. And actually, this particular case it's probably a bit too low.
Sorry, but it's the same power consumption on the 2 bills?
It's, I'll show you.
How many kilowatts per hour?
Yeah, you know what, I think I'm going to have to look at it here rather than, I think it's the same one I've got here, actually. So I think you can actually see it easier in print. And on this one, the February was 994, and here it went down to 143. But this isn't telling the whole story, because that's the consumption on the meter.
Oh.
Right? And remember, the first place that the electricity goes is into your house, and you're consuming it. So
you show less?
So
because you're consuming less.
Your consumption can apparently go down, right? Even though it is. So in fact, what happens is you have to take now, you have to read 2 things. The inverter itself has a meter on it, okay? So you see how much energy you're producing, and then you see how much energy you're using from CFE, and that combination now is the energy that you.
So in simple terms, if I'm usually using 1,500 kilowatts per hour on 2 months,
right?
Period. When I have my solar panels installed, I can use the same, and I'm going to be using the same amount of energy.
Yes.
But since my panels are going to be taking up 1,000,
Yes.
I'm going to just pay for 500.
Absolutely, and the amount you're paying for that 500 is dramatically different. Let's use your example, okay? Today, if you were on 1,500, which is not unusual in any.
No.
I've seen much higher consumptions than that, but let's say you're on 1,500. The napkin math is that's a DAC rate and that's at 3 pesos 54 for each one of those. Okay, so I don't know if anyone's got the calculator on them, but you know, if you multiply 1,500 by 3.54, and then they hit you with this very clever little thing called DAP, which is another 5% tax, and then they hit you with EVA, which is another 16%. Okay, so if you just do that math, and then we put the panels in, and we produce 1,000 of those watts, and you're now using from CFE 500. What will happen is, the first 300 of that, 150 you get at 70 cents. It's nothing. It's, you know, it's 100 pesos, right? And then you get another 150 at 0.89. Again, it's, you know, it's 120 pesos, something like that. And just the excess, so in this case it would be 200 kilowatt hours at 280. So the economic savings in that particular case that you're mentioning would be up on the scale of probably somewhere between 80 and 90% economic savings per month. And that's where the return on investment on the system is just really quick. And it's where you think, wow, this now makes sense. Because, you know, the guy I'm partnered with, that I told you about, you know, Luke's Merida and everything, I mean, when he put his system in, he was paying $5 a watt. I mean, his system cost him about $50,000 to put in. That's a lot of money. I mean, today, you know, the same system that he put in would probably be around 10,000. So, you know, it's dramatic. So for him, he did it because he just didn't want to give all that money to CFE. But economically, it wasn't as pretty a picture as it is today. And there are occasions where it's not. For example, just so you know, it's not all, wow, solar is the answer on everything. People with very, very, very high consumption, and you've probably heard about this, sometimes go out and they buy their own transformer, and they're buying energy from CFE at medium tension. And so CFE say, well, hey, I have to put less infrastructure in, so I'll send a reading, well, they take a reading on your meter every 15 minutes, all through the day. And then whatever the highest reading was in that 24-hour period, and then they do that every day for a month, and whatever the highest of every 24 hours of the whole month, they go, CFE had to have 25 kilowatts available for you all the time. So I'm going to charge you. And they charge about 250 pesos per kilowatt of that demand maximum. So what happens with those customers is they actually have a charge which is almost as high in this demand maximum as they do in actual consumption. So it drives people crazy. Yeah.
I'm one of those people with his own transformer.
Okay.
Do you have any experience there with the bidirectional meters?
Yes.
So it works the same principle?
It does. What you have to look at is the actual rate that you're paying per kilowatt hour on. Are you on OM or HM?
HM.
Okay, it's pretty inexpensive.
Mm-hmm.
About 140, something around that, right?
By the time I'm done, it's 205. By the time I'm done.
Yeah, because of that demand maximum. What happens is the panels can take away the energy used, but it's not going to affect the demand maximum. That's the challenge. So depending on the circumstance, I mean, I've got a client right now in Puerto that we've just decommissioned his, you know, I want the sea breeze and I want to enjoy it. So he, you know, totally different lifestyles. So for his specific case, it was better for him to sell the transformer on the second-hand market, go back to the one tariff, and come out of that medium tension tariff. But you know, I'll show you the numbers with pleasure, and you can see for yourself.
And going back to his example, is that realistic?
Oh yeah.
Using 1,000
yes.
with the solar panel.
Yeah.
And
One of the things that's fun, the inverter actually has, like, as I said, a meter, but it's not like a really intelligent meter. So it will show you what you've been producing for the life of the system, and it will show you what you produce today. That's it. So being a bit of a nerdy geek, I bought a monitoring card for mine. So like on my phone, I can pull up and see exactly what I produced in a day, a week, a month, which I really like. And you know, you can do the sort of the higher math on it. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the month of August, I produced 938 kilowatts in 1 month. You know, and I've got 24
Keeping
pounds.
CFE hot.
24 pounds.
So, in 24 panels, you produce almost 1,000 kilowatts
Almost 1,000
in 1 month?
Yeah, 1,000 kilowatt hours.
It's 200 watt panels or less?
At 250.
250 or
Yeah, 250. So it's a 6 kilowatt system. So yeah, no, it's the, you know, this is, I mean, the biggest myths probably are, you know, oh yeah, you can have solar but you can't run air conditioning. Another myth is that you can't have both. You can't have CFE and solar. Of course you can. What else? Can't remember what other myths we put on there. But those are sort of those are very common ones. Oh, and just for a laugh, I'll just go to this slide to finish up with. Not all installations are the same. Now, I didn't make this up. This is a true client that we were called to. Could you come and help us with our installation? And we looked them up and they said, well, you're not our client. No, you didn't do the installation. I don't know if you can see this. They put one panel on top of a mini split. They drilled a hole through the panel, which voided the warranty, and run a little bit of wire down to a screw on the roof to hold it down. They've got wires just running every which way but loose. I mean, it's a nightmare. And then they did this with the inverter, which these people should be in jail, in my opinion. First of all, they've used plastic PVC conduit, which is okay for AC wiring. It's not okay for DC wiring. It's not code. They used an AC breaker box, which is one of the things I said. This is very, very common. Without getting too technical, basically AC, as you know, does this, right? So what happens is, as it's doing 60 cycles, okay, it's passing through zero a lot. So when you break the circuit with a breaker, sort of thought, okay, it only has to go a relatively short distance because it's quite an easy thing. And it doesn't have to do it particularly quickly. It takes about 25 microseconds, something like that. But DC doesn't do that. DC is running constantly at whatever voltage it is, and this could be 300, 400 volts, right? And so when you do that and you do it not quick enough, you can get an arc. And so if you're the one switching it off, you might have a nasty surprise. So this should be a DC disconnect. Now the reason they don't put it is a DC disconnect costs a lot more. Okay, and it's very difficult to get unless you happen to be a professional solar company, in which case you have them in your warehouse. Right? Then they used here, having said this, should be galvanized. Here they've just used metal, but it's not coated. It should be coated with PVC because you can see it's all, I don't know if you can see from this picture, but it's all rusted. So that's not good. This is inside the box. And what we have here is we have the AC side and the DC side. But how the hell can you tell the difference? Because they've used all the same color wire. And to make matters worse, they've done no grounding whatsoever. So basically, if there's any sort of short in the system, this box is now live. It's a metal box. So it could be really interesting because you get AC and DC. AC, DC. It could be a band, right? The cables are the same color, so you can't tell which is the positive and which is the negative. Oh, but they put a little bit of insulating tape. So luckily we can. By the way, no criticism of Mexican electricians. As I said, I've lived here 30 years. I love Mexico. My wife's Mexican. But have you ever bought a fan and had it installed? You know, it comes with those little special things for connecting wires together. The very first thing that the electrician does here is throw those away. okay? Because much better, strip the wire, with a knife, and then tie them together, wrap around, you're good. Well, yeah, not so good, but really, really bad in DC, okay? You do not want that sort of thing in a big solar array. Here they've put the cable directly into the box, which is, it's a metal edge. So it's going to move over time, and it's going to rub through. And when it rubs through, now you're going to have the box live. It's going to be very interesting. This is how it should be installed. This is how we install it. You've got a DC connector on one side, the AC connector on the other, and there's no holes. So the wekas, little geckos, they love living in like little inverter boxes and stuff like that. It's nice, warm, dry space for them, but it's not a good mixture. Termites, ants, wekas, bees can all go up in there. So it should be totally sealed like this. All right. Here's a few more installations of ours. And